Well, hello and welcome to episode 47 of It's Never Sunny in Seattle, a Seattle Mariners podcast. I'm your host today, Evan James, joined by Michael Ahedo and Andrew Shorestad. The Mariners are playing Boston this afternoon, and there's been a couple of roster moves. Taylor Trammell was up. Steven Souza has been mercifully DFA'd. Kyle Lewis is playing potentially his last rehab game tonight. And the Mariners have dropped 3 of 4 so far from the Red Sox, and it's gone a little rough, but there are a couple of bright spots. And we wanted to start off on a positive note today with Julio Rodriguez, who has been not only the Mariners' arguably best player over the last month, but has been kind of just a sensation overall. He's batting about 320 over the month so far, and just making plays in the outfield, stealing bases, being kind of a threat wherever he is. And he's really the only Mariner right now who is getting no off days whatsoever. He's been the starting center fielder virtually every game so far this season. I don't really know what to even critique. He's just been such a vision so far. I guess I'll kick it over to Anders first. How much of a pleasant surprise and kind of an oasis in the desert has he been, kind of given the way the Mariners have played so far?
I don't know if you guys remember, but I had kind of tepid expectations for him coming into the season. I think I projected him for something like 255, 260 with like 25 homers, and I thought that would be like a solid jumping off point. He's probably going to be a little bit better than that at this rate. I don't know about the homers part. He's like he did start a little bit slow in the power category, but he's definitely going to steal a ton more bases than I think any of us expected. But one of the biggest things that we have decried for the last couple of years for the Mariners is just the lack of having a star player, and the fact that it's very hard to be like a genuinely good team if you don't have a player who you're like, that's an all-star. And that's a very archaic way of viewing baseball in our analytic world where we're all thinking, WAR totals and WRC plus totals and, all-star appearances is, I think, a very, ancient way of looking at who's good and who's bad, but it is a good barometer for like the dominance of a team. And to have a player who's worthy of that is a huge thing to have, I think.
Adam Frazier just hit a dinger, a 2-run dinger.
Is that his first home run of the season? I don't think I've seen him hit a home run before.
It might be. I don't think. I feel like it's a second, maybe third. But yeah, he doesn't have much pop. I think it was like right field, Fenway. Yeah, I think that I think that's actually an all right way of looking at it, Durs, because I mean, when you think about team construction, there are really two ways to do it, and obviously, there's a little bit of it's a spectrum. One way is kind of the stars and scrubs approach, which is kind of what the Angels were rocking with before this season, and is generally not a great approach. The other one is kind of the opposite, where you don't have, a Trout or an Ohtani, a star per se, but you have a lot of solid players. I think that's definitely what the Mariners are kind of going for right now. But Julio, he definitely hasn't been a star, but he definitely looks like someone who could be. And I tweeted this earlier, an hour or so ago. But in the past month, he's slashing, in terms of average OBP slugging, 318, 364, 464, which, is a 148 WRC plus, which means he's been 48% above average in the past month relative to the league. That's really good. And paired with his defense and his base running, like that is a superstar. That's a star. I don't know about superstar, but that's a star. If the fielding is above average, which I think it is right now. So yeah, I think he's making headway for the beginning of a really long and good career. The I guess the knock is, like, if you look at the Mariners leaderboard just in terms of like sweet spot percentage, most of the hitters are pretty good at hitting the ball at optimal angles or launch angles, and Julio's one of the lone hitters who isn't. He's at 27%, which is, let me find, the league average is like 33, whereas the rest of the hitters are like 33 to 38. So that basically just means he's hitting, too many ground balls, too many pop-ups. And that might sound bad, but when you hit hard ground balls, that's not much of a problem. And that's why Julio has a 390, I guess, through today. It's a 388 BABIP, which is okay because he has plus speed. He hits a lot of ground balls. He's going to run a higher BABIP than most. But I think what you're kind of looking at is a hitter who's going to adjust. Like maybe he'll always hit a lot of ground balls, but they're always going to be hard. And we've seen players like Wander Franco and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Kind of move out of that and start to hit, lift the ball more and hit it over the fence. So, he's always going to be a player that hits more line drives than average. You do want to see him clean up the pop-ups. If he does that, man, I think we're looking at a really, really good hitter. And the Ks are coming down.
I think we talked about this earlier, but that was the Vlad problem for a while, was that Vlad just hit a crap ton of ground balls. And it wasn't until he really elevated that he became a dominant hitter. And maybe that's what's going to happen with Julio. And Julio is hitting a lot of ground balls, but the funny thing is that he's like Ichiro now, where he can just like run them out. So
it really is that thing.
Yeah, he kind of just masks his batted ball problems with his speed, which is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, do you think he's going to be a guy who, like, once he figures out his swing, is going to compete for batting titles because of that? Or he's going to BABIP like 360 and just he's going to hit like 350?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it depends on like when he figures it out. If he figures that out in the next couple years, I definitely kind of think so, because he's not really he's not a fly ball guy. He's a ground ball line drive guy. I think he's always going to run a high BABIP. And it's kind of like, what does BABIP mean? Because BABIP doesn't take home runs into account, and he's going to hit home runs. So I think he's always going to run a high one. I guess the way to look at it might be like expected weighted on base average on contact. So yeah, I think like the speed will probably fall off, before his quote unquote prime, before he's like 27. But that gives him, not necessarily 6 years, but that gives him some time. So I kind of think so. I think he's going to hit for a high-ish average. The other thing is he's got to bring the K percentage down, but like the projections already have him at like 25% ROS. And relative to the league, I think that's pretty good. Let me pull up the league average this year for hitters. It's
I think
22 and
the
a half.
question is, we probably can agree he probably has a 30-30 season in him, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Do you think he has a 40-40 season in him?
I sure hope so, man. It'd be cool. I'm gonna say yes. I think he can do it.
I'll be conservative and say no. I mean, he's projected for, if you like Fangraph's depth charts, he's projected for 30 stolen bases and 17 home runs
this year.
Yeah. And your rookie season when you're 21, I don't know, he's a really efficient base stealer. I guess it just depends on his average, or rather his on base percentage.
I think you're right. It does really depend on the timing, because his speed will slow down. There's going to be a point where he'll probably age into like a 15 steal player, which is still very cool and very valuable. But the question is whether he will maintain this speed at the same time as his power elevates to a high enough level.
Right.
Because his power is probably also going to grow over time, but will the two cross at any point where he has the potential for kind of like a Goldilocks season where he could go 40-40 and stay healthy during that year?
It is really like, it is really a timing thing. I don't know. Like, it's not like he needs to bulk up, but there's also, that's how bodies naturally age is you add weight. He's not going to be a 21-year-old forever. Like, I'm 27 and I'm like, I don't just like metabolize things anymore. Just like,
I
like
know,
they
and I'm
used to.
26, and I have to straighten my back because my back is hurting right now.
It gets worse,
too.
boys. It gets worse. I promise
too.
you.
I know.
It
I
doesn't
know
get
it.
better.
I've had chronic back and neck pain since I was 21. I'm mentally ill, y'all.
That sounds like a physical problem, but go on.
Well, they overlap. But yeah, I mean, he was never supposed to have the speed. Fangraphs thinks, he's a 60-50 runner, so they think he'll be a league average runner later, whatever that means, future. I don't know when future is. I don't know. I kind of just think he's a 55 runner until, I don't know, 30, whatever. I think he's just always going to kind of run. And he's a high motor, high effort guy. So, yeah, I mean, that's really the thing is, I mean, he does need to kind of improve his I guess awareness on the base paths, because he's made a couple silly mistakes, which he's 21. Like Jared Kelenic is also, I think he just got picked off like the other week. It's really just swinging through pitches, taking called strike threes, and what was the third thing? Oh, not hitting so many grounders, because like his rolling 10 game swinging strike percentage is 19.6, which the kind of rule of thumb, I think more so for pitchers, but is that you kind of multiply that by 2, so that means he might deserve like a 40% K percentage. I don't know. It's a small sample.
I think my biggest concern with Julio is he going to be a Mariner long term, or is he going to be a Bryce Harper type figure for Seattle, where he's here for like some really important years, but then he ends up elsewhere. And it's way too early to like say that and say for sure what the case is going to be, because we don't even know if, like, for all we know, Stanton won't even be an owner of the team at that point.
Yeah.
Who knows what 5-6 years will bring, but it is a thing I will worry about until he gets a fat extension.
I think it's different. I think he really adores Seattle, and I think we really adore him. And I think the Mariners have made it pretty clear that they find it important to reward, the kind of organically developed, players. So I kind of think he'll be a Mariner for, I don't know about life, but for the next decade.
I think the question is less, is he a Mariner long term, and more, what does the team look like when that becomes the question? Durs asked a question in the Slack yesterday that got a pretty varied response, honestly, much more than I expected.
I was shocked.
I was shocked too. I was actually shocked at who voted where, because just based on people's like latent opinions that I have of them, I wouldn't have guessed some people voted the way they did, myself included, honestly, when I went to take that poll. For the record, we're being vague about this. The question was, is Jerry Dipoto the general manager of this team in 2024, given the way that this has played out so far this year?
I said March
no.
2024.
March 2024. So that would give him next year as well to theoretically shit the bed. But
you said no, and I said no. And Mikey said yes,
no.
I think.
Mikey said yes. It was a pretty even split. I think there was like 11 votes, and it was like 5 and 6 the last time I checked. And there was this dichotomy of opinion there. I think that we're in a weird place with the Mariners, because, we're talking about Julio. We really don't have anything to critique about Julio over his first 170 plate appearances, other than theoretically he could strike out less, which is, given the context of everything, nothing. But the rest of the Mariners are in a much more interesting state. I think we should transition to talking about kind of the state of the team. The question we got was, how do we think the Mariners are positioned for a potential wild card run? Where are we sitting now in the AL West, and kind of like what are the general prospects for this season? And I guess I'll kick it over to you first, Sturs. I have a really soured opinion on this at this exact moment, and I think that part of that is shaded because the team has played their worst baseball in 2 seasons over the past 2 weeks. I think they're lost 18 of the last 24 games, so they are in free fall. And I hesitate to bury anybody while that's going on, because like we talked yesterday and John was in the Slack kind of like preaching patience, that we played the hardest part of the schedule so far. We have games against the A's and the Rangers, mercifully, to kind of to draw us back in. What do you think? Where are we in the grander picture, Durs?
It's one of those things where, like, when you're at rock bottom, it's hard to make a real rational judgment on where things are as a whole, because unquestionably things will get better from here for the Mariners. I think the question is the degree to which it will get better. I maintain the stance that I think that this is an 84 to 85 win team, and that I think they will still achieve that. And the question is whether that will be good enough given the grand picture, or whether, can they rip off an 8-game, 9-game winning streak, and all of a sudden that 85 wins becomes 89 wins, and maybe that they're actually a decent team. So, there's definitely the potential for going on a crazy winning streak. I think it was last year, wasn't it the Cardinals that had like an absolutely absurd run at one point where they won like 13 games in a row or something, and all of a sudden they were like way ahead in the division, and that happened in the summer at some point. So there's always the possibility when you're in May that something like that can happen. Here in Northern Virginia, a lot of people around here are Nationals fans, obviously, and everybody remembers the Nationals season, the year they won the World Series. They started off like really terribly. I think they were pretty close to where the Mariners are in terms of the over under 500, but it was like at least half a month later in the season than we are now.
They
And
were
they obviously
they were
came back.
25 and 35, and I remember this because at the 60 game mark, they were 10 under 500. And the anecdote was that during that shortened season, the 2020 COVID season, they wouldn't have made the playoffs in that given
Right.
season, was the anecdote.
Right. So obviously, the Mariners are more than capable of coming back. Literally, they can come back. The question is whether they have the capability to, given the structure of the team. And this kind of segues into another question that was asked yesterday among us, which was, is Jerry Dipoto a good manager or a good general manager? Did he do a good job? Has he made a good team? And it's a tough question to answer because we don't know the resources that Dipoto was working with this winter. We don't know if he had the sign off to give Story the contract that Boston did, or a contract that Story would have signed with Seattle, or Bryant, or name your player. But I think that given the resources he had, he did a pretty good job. And I think my main problem is with depth, because the problems that the Mariners have had this season are definitely ones that he could have anticipated. Haniger got hurt again, and Kelenic underperformed, and all of a sudden we were stuck with Steven Souza in the outfield every day. And those two things happening should not have been seen as like this really strange phenomena. Haniger is injury prone. Kelenic had not proven himself at the big league level. We're fortunate, frankly, that the Mariners have not been worse in terms of injury. And I think I mentioned this in terms of starting pitching. This team has been pretty lucky in terms of how healthy they've been. Sadler was hurt, obviously. We've had a couple of bullpen problems, but Brash underperforming is really the only real problem we've had. And Ray has underperformed, but you're not going to replace him, and he's looked better recently. So, and we don't really have the depth if somebody got hurt. Like, God forbid, Flexen or Marco got hurt and had to miss a couple months. Like, who are we calling up? Justice Sheffield? Nick Margevicius?
Oh, God, no.
It's not pretty. And this is something that was super avoidable, and this is why we preached the whole winter: sign Tyler Anderson, sign someone like that. And I know like Joe Doyle was like championing the no Tyler Anderson bandwagon, but I didn't understand it, because you could still have Anderson in the bullpen or like in a long relief role in waiting while you have Kirby out there throwing innings. Like, signing a guy like Anderson did not preclude them from letting a guy like Kirby or Brash rip. It just was a good like fallback plan, and Anderson could be a 2-inning relief specialist in the meanwhile. That's kind of how the Dodgers were using him until they needed him, and that's exactly what happened. Now he's been pretty solid for them, but it's hard to rehash. It's bad to rehash, I guess, things that we can't change. So I guess the question is, can the Mariners put together a wild card run? Absolutely. Will they? A lot has to happen, and signing Justin Upton is not going to do it.
Let's talk about that
I
for a
forgot about
second.
that.
What's going on with that? Because I legitimately panicked when I saw that news. Some of the panic went away when I saw Taylor Trammell getting activated from the injured list and suddenly playing and being on base today, which has been a wonderful surprise. I didn't expect to wake up this morning and see Taylor Trammell on base. But
Was
what's
it you,
going on
Evan, who
with that?
said this is not something that a team does when things are going right? Was that you who said
Yes,
that?
it was me. Yes. It's not. It's
That's
not.
kind of
That's
fair.
yeah. But what's going on with that? Because let me lay this out. Let me lay this out real quick.
Lay it
Kyle
out.
Lewis, his last day for his injury assignment is today. Today is day 19, I believe, or 20. So tomorrow will be day 21. He has to be activated after today. He cannot
Mm.
play anymore. In order to put him back on the injured list, he needs to be inactive for 10 days. So if they were to decide he's not ready, he needs to stay in the minor leagues and rehab again. He has to play for another month. That's a 20-day assignment plus 10 days. That's 30 days. That doesn't put him back here for 4 weeks. Coincidentally, that's when Justin Upton appears to be ready from his spring training or whatever it is he's doing in Arizona with the Mariners. And Taylor Trammell is here. So I'm really, really mystified by this. Either they don't think Kyle's ever going to play the outfield again, and this is some kind of a hedge bet, but should Justin Upton really be playing outfield for the Mariners? That's a fair question to ask, isn't it?
This might just be a no more Souza's approach. Like, God forbid, we end up with a decimated outfield again. We just can't have Steven Souza
I don't
again.
know why that was ever a thing. It's
Why don't they just play Dylan Moore in right field? He's a perfectly acceptable backup outfielder. Like, it's
because he
not that
can't
big a
hit.
deal. Okay, but Souza literally did not hit while he was here. I think he went 1 for 13 or something over 4 games, and
I think I don't know. I could see Justin Upton having some sort of resurgence as a hitter. Like all he really needs to do is hit somewhere around league average and not be a disaster in the field. Like he can still run a little bit. He still hits the ball pretty hard. Um, his results have been worse than his expected results, which you kind of wonder why that is. He has kind of a we talk a lot about like the drag on batted balls. Kind of wonder if it's because he hits a lot of fly balls, which would be even worse this year because of the drag on the ball. Um, I do not expect Kyle Lewis to play hardly any outfield for the foreseeable future. I have long said, I've said this since last season, that I think his days as a center fielder are over. Uh, so, uh, if he's DHing, uh, I think that probably means some Justin Upton in the outfield, probably a lot of days off. I think it's just kind of a hedge. So that's kind of my opinion on that. And to speak towards kind of our position in the AL West, I kind of think about team construction. And one way to think about it is our team construction, which for the most part, it's been that Marco hasn't been good. The bullpen hasn't been 2021 bullpen, which we probably shouldn't have expected. And we've had a couple kind of black holes on offense. I don't think that any of that continues per se. The hitting will, they'll probably continue to struggle as long as Lewis and Haniger are out of the lineup, but we still haven't seen Winker hit like a 100 WRC plus, despite having equal, actually I need to check his numbers, but he's still been like a
he
really
actually was at 101 when we did the podcast last week on Tuesday. So he's been
so
above
he's
100
fallen.
WRC plus, or like right around there for about 5
Right.
days now.
Yeah, and like his numbers are a little down, but they're still well above league average. But his numbers are well below league average. So, there's something to it. Like he's not barreling the ball or hitting the ball especially hard, but the walks are up. And he's still, getting into it here and there. So I think Winker will come around. I think, the new ball might be kind of in his head. I think the bullpen will get better. TBD with Marco. But the thing I'm kind of thinking about is it's not just the Mariners. Like, they don't exist in a vacuum. It's not just the Mariners playing against like the computer. Who do y'all think leads the Angels in WAR?
Oh, I know
Mike
the answer.
Trout.
I feel like no, it's gonna be Taylor Ward.
It's Taylor Ward.
What?
Do I think that Taylor Ward continues to lead the Angels in WAR? Fuck no. I think that he's gotten off to a hot start. I don't know if like just while we were
Taylor Ward
plotting,
is batting 370. What black magic is this?
Yeah, he's also walking more than he's striking out, I believe.
the expected numbers are good. They're not better than Trout, but they're top 5 in baseball. There's also that like Jock Peterson has top 5, has a top 5 xWOBA. I do not think that will continue. There is kind of a phenomenon where the better people are, the more outrageous their stats are. We're like, oh, well, this can't be real. But like, the more outrageous you are, the more that you should believe that, some of it is real. And so I think he's probably a legitimately improved player. Do I think he's Mike Trout? Once again, fuck no. The Angels aren't a particularly well constructed team, I don't think. Unless they do have some sort of, special sauce or black magic or what's it? What's the
They're gonna
juice
come
in
back
the
down though.
super Space Jam? What is it? Special juice? Nope.
I haven't seen that movie, to be honest with you.
Me? What? Oh, that's fine.
You
not
haven't
that
seen
great.
original Space Jam?
I haven't seen any Space Jam of any
You
kind.
Wow,
sick
okay.
bastard. Anyways, I mean, like, their top pitcher in WAR is Shohei. Can we expect Shohei to stay healthy? I don't know. Can you expect
He did last year, but yeah,
Noah Syndergaard to stay healthy? Who's their
no.
third? I don't know.
Is he? I thought his peripherals were also bad too.
They're not great, and even as a hitter, he hasn't been that great. Patrick Sandoval
Oh,
pitched.
I meant anyway.
Who? Patrick
I meant
Sandoval's
Syndergaard.
pitched. Yeah, no, they're not. And Shohei's are like, actually, they're pretty good. His hitting peripherals aren't great. Patrick Sandoval has pitched 87 innings last season. Like, he's never eclipsed 100 innings, and he's been in the league since 2019. This is not a team that you expect to really perform well over the course of a full season.
No, but you know what they're totally gonna do is they're totally gonna trade Joe Adele for like some ace pitcher at the deadline.
Oh God, yeah, you might be right. Oh, that sucks. Maybe we'll do the same with Noel Marte. But my point, is that between Lorenzen, Syndergaard, Sandoval, Ohtani, they're all pitchers that you would call injury prone. Reed Detmers basically looks like Syndergaardian or Lorenzian in terms of K minus walk percentage. I don't know. They don't have great options. So say what you will about the Mariners, and like there are things to say about the Mariners roster construction, but the Angels aren't a well constructed team. The Astros are. So it just depends to me how healthy they stay, how well they play for the first couple 3 months. So that's my take on that situation.
The Angels seem not very future proof too. Like, they're having a killer year, and this just might be, as we phrased it before, their year. Because a season is short enough where fluky things can last all year, and it's long enough where fluky things don't necessarily have to. We saw this last year with the Mariners' clutch statistics and their, runs after the 7th inning and some of the weird underlying things that went into how they actually managed to be 19 games above 500. The Angels, to me, feel like a team that is maximizing whatever magic they're on right now and might legitimately be nothing next year with the exact same group of players. They also feel like they have gotten not penalized by the dead ball to the degree that some teams have, and that's anecdotal. But there are some hitters who have been decimated by it and some hitters who have been virtually unaffected by it. And we see that in the Mariners lineup with players like Suarez, who it doesn't seem to bother him at all. And then you have
Winker.
everybody else who, Winker, who it seems
Mhm.
like it sapped so much power from him. So I think that the Angels are kind of an interesting test case. I do think we're late enough in the season where it's fair to say they are not fool's gold, right? Like the things that the Angels do well, they definitively do well, and barring injury, they're going to continue to be good at them. Right?
Yep.
They're in front of us. And as this relates to the Mariners' competitive position, like I said, I think over the last week I've soured a lot. I think part of the reason why I'm a little down on the Mariners is because I felt like this week and in particular the last two series have been very consequential for where the team was. It's like, so what? You lose for the first 5-6 weeks of the season. Okay, you're still in a position to win a series and be back at 500 and reset the book, so to speak. The way they've played against Boston has really been hard to swallow in that context because they needed this. They needed even a split. If they had gone 2-2, they
Yeah.
would have come out of it 4 games under 500, feeling like they're still in it. If they lose today, they are 8 games down. 8 games is a lot. They were never 8 games down last year. The lowest they were was 5 games under 500. And it's a question, like John was preaching optimism. I believe that. I believe if the Mariners' best play is ahead of them, it's a question of, is the hole already too deep for them to dig themselves out of it?
I think the thing is, we, or at least I, probably most of us, expected that 2023 was going to be a better Mariners year than 2022 anyway. At least me, I expected 2022 was going to be a potential playoff year. I thought they had the talent, more talent than last year, certainly. Sorry?
Set like a stepping stone year.
Yeah, and I thought that, this is like the beginning of the window opening. But if they go out there and they win 76, 77 games this year, it's going to be real ugly, and people are going to be asking a lot of questions. And that's why I was asking the Dipoto question. Like, at what point does ownership turn to Dipoto and go, like, what the fuck? Like, you told us that this is going to be a winner, and it's looking like a pile of dog
They're
shit.
projected for 77.
Yeah.
It does remind us or me of previous years where it's like, all right, we got Adam Frazier. It's like we got Chris D'Onofrio, we got Justin Ruggiano, which Adam Frazier like kind of is in that vein. Like, was he an All-Star?
Austin Jackson.
Yeah,
he had a career year last year. He batted 300. So,
I mean, the difference is they let him open up the pocketbook a little bit, and he did shell out $115 million to Robbie Ray, lest I forget. I'm a bootlicker.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, it's like if you go to a really nice restaurant and they give you a really good appetizer, and you're like, okay, this is really cool. Like, this tastes really great. It looks awesome. And then they just are like, all right, that's it, everyone. Hope you liked your appetizer.
Shit.
Like, that's kind of that's kind of like what the Robbie Ray thing was. It's like, oh, we thought we were in for a big season of spending, and like, yes, I'm thankful that the Mariners signed Robbie Ray. I'm thankful for this really great appetizer, but like, I came here for more than that, and I was told that we'd have more than that, and we did not get more than that.
Yeah. I mean, everything. I think with the current setup, everything would have had to go right. Kelenic would have had to turn it around. Julio would have had to do what he's doing. Frazier would have had to do what he's doing. Ray would have had to have been a Cy Young. Kirby or Brash would have had to have broken out, and I wouldn't say that either of them have. And the bullpen would have had to continue to do what it was doing. So it was always going to be anti-France. Like, Ty France, should he have been this? I wouldn't necessarily say so. So everything was always going to have to kind of go right, and that means health too, which we shouldn't have bet on this. Wow, Ty France's rest of season projections are so good. Oh my gosh, he's supposed to be like a 5-WAR player. That's insane.
Yeah, at first base,
man just rakes.
Okay, so this was a question on how you can make it, Mikey.
Oh my god. it's the first time we've ever really had a good first baseman hit since like John Olerud, right?
That's a
been a
good
while.
point.
Yeah.
Russell Branyan was pretty dope. Let's not forget
Yeah,
that first year. Branyan was dope.
it feels so good.
Um,
I'm
this was a
pre-coming
question on
over
Twitter
here.
that like, are the Mariners gonna sell this summer? And to that I say, like, if they legitimately sell, so by which I mean, like, okay, maybe they trade off the guys that are going to be free agents at the end of the year. They make like a Graveman-esque trade, right? So maybe they trade Frazier for like a young starting pitcher who, like, what if they trade Frazier for Eliezer, for example? Like, I think that's like not exactly a selling move. That would be like, you're making a move that's legitimately potentially going to help the 2023 club. I think that outside of that, I think if they sell, Depoto's done. So I don't think he will,
No, he won't.
because he's banked everything on this rebuild being successful.
They don't have the pieces to do a sell. For what it's worth, I do not
Well,
think
France
that.
would be a sell.
Yeah, France would be
Oh,
a sell.
God.
Like Julio, who is realistically off the table. Jared, who is
JP,
realistically off the table. JP, who they just signed and is probably not going anywhere. The
I
guys that they
forgot
have
about
to
that.
trade: Winker, Frazier, Suarez, Chris Flexen, maybe to a lesser degree Marco are theoretically the guys on the table. I don't know if
no. I think
like
if you
is the
trade anybody
return
that's not a free agent at the end of the year, you can't do it. Like, I don't
is
think
the
they trade anybody but Haniger and Frazier.
in any case, even including the guys I just mentioned, is the return for any of those guys actually interesting? Because some of those guys like Suarez and Winker, and to a lesser degree Frazier, are all relatively highly paid. You'd have to pay all the money just to get a prospect back, and even then, they're not playing well enough, or you're going to get an A-lister. We're talking, a very much a fringy guy. Like, is there even actual interest from us as fans in trading these guys? Like, what return for Frazier is going to excite us? I don't know if it's out there.
I
Can
mean, I certainly
y'all?
didn't think.
Oh, nope.
Go ahead.
Wrong.
Yeah, you go.
I certainly didn't think that they could get Toro for Graveman. So, I mean, it's hard to tell, right?
Can y'all name a Mariners hitter that doesn't have a pretty fatal flaw as a player?
Julio?
Well, yeah, Julio.
Besides
What
him.
would you say Francis? What would you say is Francis' fatal flaw?
I don't think he's a good fielder. I think that has been.
He's not a bad fielder though. It's not fatal.
Yeah, but paired with the base running, I don't know. Yeah, I think you're right. If you're a 5-4 player, you're probably not. So, I guess I'm just thinking, like, do the Mariners have a well-rounded player outside of Julio? I would argue no.
But a healthy
I
Haniger would definitely have teams interested.
maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
a Haniger from last year would have teams interested.
I mean,
For
you
sure.
had, I don't know if you guys remember, Divish went on the Lookout Landing pod last summer and said that 15 teams were calling about Luis Torrens.
What? Why were they calling
Yeah.
about Luis Torrens?
Because he was a catcher first base, like,
were
potentially.
Were they calling to check how he was doing? What?
Would any of them like to be calling us right now is the real question.
Was that the
Are they
deadline
still
last year?
interested?
Yeah, that was like the post-deadline pod, I think. It was like either right after the deadline or like a week or two afterwards.
All right, I'm weird. We should have returned their calls and I don't know.
No, it's a good thing we hung on to him, because he can definitely stick it in the big leagues. That's what I've been told. So,
regardless, what I meant to say was that there are definitely be teams interested in a healthy Frazier. I mean, Frazier got a decent amount. Well, I guess the Padres or the Pirates did kind of sell low. No, the Pirates got a good haul. It was the Padres who sold low. The Pirates got a decent haul for Frazier last year, and he was an all-star, so probably they don't get that. But they could get like some interesting pieces. You're not going to get a top 50 prospect from this Mariners group. If that's what you're asking for, it's not happening.
I mean,
yeah,
and that's
you're
what
not
that's
get rebuild cornerstones.
That's what I'm talking about. Is like every player is like a Suarez that, I mean, he's been all right fielding, but he's kind of the same as like France. Winker can't field. It's a lot of that. So, I mean, JP, like, can he hit? I don't know.
But the question is also, like, on the market, what perfect players are on the market, the trade market, legitimately, right? Like, not most of the great players are on great teams, so they're
Paul
not going to be
Sewald.
tradable. Okay,
Ow!
there's a good question. What does Seawald get the Mariners?
He might be
Cease and
the
desist.
most valuable of the relief pitchers to trade right now, other than maybe like I could see Munoz getting a good return if somebody was really interested.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Well, they just extended him, so I kind of doubt it. But yeah,
Munoz.
that's another move where I feel like it would need to be a package where the return made enough sense for 2023 in order for that trade to make sense. I think.
Regardless, Dipoto talks all the time about, like never truly selling. It's always kind of buying and selling or a soft sell, whatever. So I think whatever happens at the deadline, it's going to be kind of that. Like, I don't think they'll trade for a player that doesn't have quote unquote team control.
No.
So,
but they did that with Frazier. Frazier only had 1 year when they traded for him.
That's true. Yeah, but that's buying.
They gave up like nothing for him. Yeah, and that was a buying.
I guess I mean, if they quote unquote like sell, I don't know. Yeah, I guess you're kind of right.
They're not gonna. I don't think at the current trajectory, they're not on a trajectory to trade Noel V. Marte for like some superstar player. That's not in the cards right now, I don't think. And maybe it would have been if they were like on pace to win 100 games and it's like, holy crap, let's do this thing. But I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, it would have been trading Noel V would have been on the table under two circumstances. One is that the team, like you said, was in a position to trade him for somebody to win this year. It wasn't a future value thing. It was a 2022 we're going for it type situation. And two, he hasn't played bad, but he's been much more pedestrian than kind of the hopes for him were so far this season. And last year would have been the time to trade him, frankly, because his prospect stock was through the roof. And I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. It's a thing that people should know. Your prospect value in terms of major league return does not count until you reach AA. That's when everything starts kicking in. And if you have been the best prospect in baseball in high A and you go to AA and you struggle, your prospect value just tanked. And Noel V's value has not tanked, but it is much more reasonable now than it was last year. I think last year they could have asked for almost anything for Noel V because there was kind of like an ethereal, he could be a number one prospect type vibe. He's much more in like top 50 now, but like bottom of the top 50 and dropping, frankly.
I love it's like the meme where like if the Mariners had traded for Jose Ramirez by sending Marte, it would have been like Marte. I mean, Ramirez is Jose Ramirez, but Novi Marte could be anything. He could even be Jose Ramirez.
So true. Do we have any other final thoughts on kind of the Mariners' competitive position, wild card prospects, the general question that was asked, or should we move on to the other question?
I just want to touch on this one more topic that I think you and I were talking about, Evan, in regards to the prospects, where we were talking about how last year we were spoiled by how rich the farm was in success. And
I'm glad
this
you
year
brought
it
this
hasn't
up.
been. Yeah, it hasn't been it hasn't been as rich in success this year. And my argument on that was basically like, I think last year was like the golden year for Mariners prospects. I don't know if we'll ever see that again from the farm in terms of like every single prospect who mattered hit and then some. We had like 4 or 5 at each level pop-up guys where it's like, oh my god, look at Cade Marlowe, oh my god, look at Adam Machko, oh my god, look at, it's just like so many guys left and right. And this year it's much more like, okay, you have a couple of guys who are like, they're doing decently, like Marte, he's doing pretty good. Harry Ford holding his own, 19-year-old at single A, good for him. You don't have the crazy amount of pop-up guys, and you have some guys that are like legitimately struggling, like Levi Stout. He's having he's having some issues. Edwin Arroyo got off to a tough start, and now he's getting a little bit better, and you just don't have the cupboard is not as deep right now either. So you don't have as many guys to get excited about. And I think also there's just a little bit of like, it's not necessarily a bad thing if the prospects are struggling. And I think we like wrap so much of our like hopes around like, oh my God, like this guy at double A has a 150 WRC plus, like let's party. But like if he has a 75 WRC plus, it doesn't mean he's going to be a shitty big leaguer. It means he's figuring it out. And the guys need time to struggle in order to get to the place where they're going to be. I mean, we saw the Mike Zunino path where like he never struggled. They called him up and he struggled against big league pitching, and he's like, I don't know what the fuck is happening to me. I'm just going to revert to whatever, I should be doing. And it like kind of broke him. I think you need
Jared
to
Kelnick. Sorry.
yeah, well,
Excuse
there's
me.
that too. You need to allow these guys the time to have their struggles, to figure out their problems as players, figure out what their flaws are and how they're going to adjust them. Because if they don't do it now, then they're going to have to do it when they're in the big leagues and someone much smarter and much more talented figures it out. And then they're going to be like, shit, like I thought I was prepared and I'm not. So I'm not really worried if a guy like Levi Stout's having problems. I'm not really worried if a guy like Noelvi isn't hitting the shit out of the ball every single time he swings. I'll be more worried if they don't turn that into a way to figure it out. And so I think that
Yeah.
I would say to the people who are like panicking about the farm, if there are any, just like chill, like give it some time. These guys are developing. It's part of the
Just
process.
chill.
I want to clarify. I was the one who brought this up, specifically the farm system performance, but it's a function of the previous discussion we were having, which was, is Jerry still going to be here? When the Mariners have been bad recently, specifically over the last 3 specific seasons, 2019, 2020, 2021, and now regrettably 2022, the justification was they are rebuilding. Look at the returns on the farm system. This is a good organization. They have good people at every level. The prospects are coming up. They're developing. They're seeing success in the minor leagues. Just wait. They don't really have that option to say that today. And it's not necessarily because the prospects haven't developed in the minors or haven't been good. You were correct yesterday when in the Slack you guys both said, hey, that's what happens when you graduate to generational prospects. Like, it's just going to happen. There was no way, no matter how the prospects did for the Mariners this year, they were not going to be ranked the second best farm system in the major leagues, purely on the virtue of Julio and Jared not being there anymore. Like, that's a baseline we're dealing with. But that being said, the expectation has shifted from, hey, look at the prospects developing on the farm. Look how good they are. Look how well everybody's doing in Tacoma in Double A, to how's the Mariners doing? And the answer so far is not great. And so there's no longer this caveat of the team is doing bad, but the future looks bright because this over here is going so well. Now it's, well, the future is now and not going so good. And also everybody's here, so there's no one to look forward to. So like, get it together, right? We're seeing narratives change in real time. And I worry about Jerry's future because he had this thing on his shoulder. He had the angel over here saying, hey, you guys want to fire me because the Mariners have been so bad? You can't do that. We have the best farm system in the sport. Where are we without that? I think is a fair question. And here's the thing. In terms of the way the prospects have actually panned out at the major league level, I think they've actually done pretty well. Like Logan Gilbert has been an unqualified success. Kirby is here ahead of schedule and pitching pretty well, even though he's had mixed results in only 2 starts. Julio is 160 plate appearances into ideally a decades-long major league career.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing okay. Like, we'd love to add Jared to that list of successes, but they're doing okay. It's a matter of, is it enough? And that remains to be seen. I can't answer that today. Pessimistic or optimistic, I don't think there's a good answer to that today. I don't think anyone can tell you.
I'm still really excited about the farm system. Like, I think Noelvi has gotten a lot of those, kind of Julio comps just because they're a little bit, raw prospects that play pretty premium positions. I don't think that he's going to be the hitter that Julio is, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be the runner either. Probably not the fielder either if he's, playing at shortstop. But I think that's kind of the guy that slots into, that position at the top of the farm system. Harry Ford, we kind of forget is a thing, and he's probably a ways away. Also, kind of oh my gosh, hi. Sorry, my cat is. Wow. Okay. Also a guy, that can slot into the top of a system, and really like, take you from a top 5, top 10 system to number 1 just by virtue of being so insanely good. And then I think they're going to develop some pitchers. I think there are pitchers like I have conversations with people who are either R&D people for teams or in agencies, and people kind of point out people that are really interesting. I think a couple guys as of late that are really catching my eye are Bryce Miller, who could be the best player in the system if he gets the command figured
Right.
out.
I
And
should say that he's been like the biggest pop up prospect for the team,
he's
the
been
system this
insane.
year.
He has
Yeah,
5 starts. He hasn't walked anyone in high A. Oh wait, is that true? No, he hasn't given up a home run. His walk rate is good though. So he's running a 29.5 K minus walk percentage. Hasn't given up a home run. It's high A at age 23, but that's really good. And the metrics look like some of the best in baseball if he's a starter, which so far so good. And Taylor Dollard has been really good in Double A. And he was someone that I was excited about, and I know that like Joe Doyle was excited about when he came out. Emerson Hancock is back in pitching, so I think good systems churn out guys at a high hit rate. The Mariners have done that. It remains to be seen if they can get the most out of their top prospects, and it's kind of more iffy there. But guys like Bryce Miller and Taylor Dollard, who are drafted and have kind of question marks, good systems get the most out of them. Good systems turn guys who people don't think much of and turn them into good players, like I thought with LJ Newsome. um, and I think they'll do that. So I think there's a lot still to be excited about. I don't know. There's a bunch of names that I could just rattle off, like Brian Wu and Michael Morales and what's his name, Andrew Miller,
Mm-hmm.
our
oh
second
yeah,
Andrew Miller.
Andrew Moore.
Brian Wu is really actually exciting. I'm glad you brought him up because he's somebody I've had my eye on and has pitched
Yeah.
pretty well so far.
So yeah,
Is
that's
he
kind of the
back?
idea.
I didn't know he was pitching already. That's cool.
I was under the impression he was back a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I gotta check, but that's the idea with systems is you develop players and you supplement in free agency, and that's kind of what the Mariners have done. I wish they would have been a little more aggressive this offseason. I would have loved Trevor Story, as I won't shut up about, but they continue. They draft really interesting pitchers, and they probably will need to supplement more on the hitting side, because I say it all the time. I don't really know how to feel about that. I don't know. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about deadline stuff and like free agency stuff later this week, because there are some really interesting free agents in 2023. So I don't know if Spotrac is accurate, but yeah.
We're at about an hour for today, so we can do two things. One is that we can wrap now. Two is that I think one thing we could touch on real quick is the bullpen, because Durs had raised an interesting point kind of about the stuff being the best in the league, but kind of their results not being where they should be, which I think is an interesting discussion to have with you two in particular. But really that's it. I think we should hold off on trade deadline stuff because
Yeah.
we're gonna have all the time in the world to talk about this when the team
Yeah.
isn't good for the next 2 months. So
Yeah.
no,
I
just
swept by Boston.
I just monologued. So Durs, tell us what you think about the stuff versus results, I guess.
Yeah, I think we talked about the bullpen on the most recent episode. I feel like we touched on it at length, where I was trying to argue that like there's a lot of good names in this pen. Like I feel like we're not giving it enough credit. And I think that I'm glad that the stats are bearing that out. I have been very concerned about the fact that like, the Mariners, especially in the most recent, what was it? What was the game? I guess it happened twice in Boston where they were like up 5-0 and then blew it. It seems like, and I'm curious if there's been research into this, but it seems like the bullpen blowups are just clustered at very bad times for the team, where they just happen during games where we cannot afford it, and then at games where like we're out of it anyway, they end up shutting it down. Like right now, I mean, we're talking in real time as this Boston game is going on. The bullpen's given up 1 run, and all told, that's not that bad.
Was
But
it
this is a
Festa?
game where they, yeah, uh,
Yeah.
For reference, I believe earlier this week I had read we were tied for the league lead with meltdowns, bullpen meltdowns, and blown saves specifically.
Oh,
So
interesting.
there's been a
yeah.
frequency
So
to it.
it feels like the opposite of last year, right? Last year, anytime it mattered, the Mariners bullpen like locked it down, and they gave up runs when the game was out of hand anyway. And now they're doing the opposite. So, like, just like we said last year, like, oh, this has to change at some point. I think it does have to change at some point this year too, where I think at some point they're going to get to, you know, we're going to get some close wins. We're going to get some games where the bullpen really helps us and isn't a hindrance. But right now, it's like we fear the bullpen and we fear specific
Yeah.
guys in particular. But we also forget like those two Mets wins, like the bullpen was big in getting us those two victories. Like it feels like we like didn't deserve those wins, and that's how it feels sometimes when you win by a run and your bullpen is nails at the end of a game. So I guess that's what I have to say about that.
We talked about injuries. I mean, I think, especially early-ish in the season, I think one of the things that you watch is that stabilize isn't the right word. People yell at me for that. That become credible or reliable quicker, or strikeout minus walk percentage. The Mariners are top 5 there. The bugaboo, so to speak, has been giving up home runs, which Johan gave up quite a few. Matt Koch, I think, served up a 1 or 2 or 3. Danny Young and Festa. Festa has been the worst about it. And Seawald, Munoz, and Swanson, have been not, they haven't limited them. So I think that's been the thing is we need to see them limit more home runs. That's especially interesting in a time where, for the first time in 5 years, the fly balls and home runs are being suppressed more than ever. So that is troubling. But I think it's a trait of a lot of these pitchers. But I also think that that's going to wash out over time. And so, I think as guys get healthy, we'll start to see the kind of talent of the Mariners bullpen kind of take form, because Penn Murphy's legit. Like, I love Penn Murphy. Anyone who throws sidearm is interesting to me.
Hey, there's another guy where the player development system really helped out a guy,
Perfect
right? Because he
example.
was
Round
drafted
30 something.
34th, yeah, which
Yeah.
doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Munoz, like, I don't think the him and Seawald, I think the home runs will kind of they won't be this bad. I think Wyatt Mills has struggled a little more than he should. I think Wyatt Mills is good. Like, he pops and Stuff Plus models that I've heard, proprietary models, and I think he should. I think part of the issue is he ought to trying to think. I think he needs to stop throwing the sinker as much. Give kind of more space between the four seam and the slider, because both are really legit pitches. Anyone who throws from that slot, like, I think of Tyler Rogers. They just have he has a really weird slider because it kind of rises. It has ride because its spin direction is up, kind of like Eliezer Hernandez, Johan, Seawald. I really like the bullpen still. I mean, Steck and Diego Castillo in particular haven't been what they were last season, and even last season Diego Castillo kind of struggled, but lots of interesting names. It's kind of the same thing as the lineup, where it's like we just have a couple guys who, and Danny Young's interesting too. He throws a fucking sweeper. So just, there are guys where you don't want to see them in the game, and they've kind of had to because of injuries. But I think it's still a really good group. I think that over time you start to see some of this stuff wash out. Again, I do this a lot. I know I've monologued. I do have one thing to say about a non-reliever. I've never seen Logan Gilbert fill up the zone like he has today. And he's also only thrown his fastball 45% of the time. He's thrown his slider 32% of the time. He's thrown his curveball 14% of the time. 31% CSW, which is pretty good. The fastball ball and play percentage is, I think, 31%, which is pretty high and is actually a little troubling to me. But that's a lot of strikes. And, I mean, he gave up 2 home runs. He walked 2. He only struck out 4. But he went 7.
This is a good lineup in a good park, though.
Exactly. In a bad park, yeah.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah. I got you. So maybe I'll write about this. I have needed to write for a while. That's encouraging. I'm not
The evolution of Logan Gilbert, part 2.
Yeah, baby. Yeah. And Robert B. Ray. I think they both deserve write-ups.
Julio! Oh, I thought that was a home run. I really thought that was out. Oh sorry.
Damn.
Julio just hit a deep fly ball. It looked like it was for the tie.
Last year that was out.
You guys. This will be real fun for our listeners to hear after learning that the Sox swept us. But
we want to believe. We want to believe so bad. Do we have anything else today, or should we wrap it here?
That's 2 games in a row where Logan's really thrown the slider a lot and not the fastball a lot. So that's intriguing.
Mikey's like
boys.
writing this article in front of us.
I am looking at his numbers. Yeah, sorry. I have to pee really bad. So
all right, we'll wrap it here.
Anyone on video can probably see me doing my potty dance and yeah.
All right, I'm Evan, and you can find me on Twitter at Evan James Audio. You can find Mikey on Twitter at Kuya Mikey. You can find Anders at Anders Jorstad. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, wherever it is you stream. Additionally, please support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/neversunnyinsseattle, and I will link that at the end of the video. Thanks for listening, and go Mariners.